The stagecoach lurched to a halt in front of the Riverside trading post, and Thomas Anderson knew his life was about to change the moment he saw her step down onto California soil. Confusion and determination written across her face in equal measure. It was late September of 1878, and the afternoon sun beat down mercilessly on the dusty main street of Riverside, California. Thomas had been leaning against the hitching post outside Murphy's General Store, waiting for a shipment of leather he had ordered for saddle repairs. At 26 years old, he had spent most of his adult life working as a ranch hand and occasional horse trainer, making enough to get by but never quite enough to settle down properly. He was tall and lean, with sun-darkened skin and calloused hands that spoke of hard labor under the California sky. The woman who emerged from the stagecoach wore a traveling dress that had seen better days, dusty from the long journey. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple bun, and her olive-toned skin suggested Mediterranean heritage. She clutched a worn leather bag to her chest and looked around with wide, uncertain eyes. The stagecoach driver handed down a small trunk, said something to her in what sounded like an attempt at helpfulness, and she responded in a cascade of musical words that Thomas had never heard before. The driver shrugged helplessly and climbed back up to his seat, leaving the young woman standing alone in the middle of the street, looking lost and overwhelmed. Thomas pushed off from the hitching post and approached slowly, not wanting to startle her. As he got closer, he could see she was probably around 22 or 23, with striking hazel eyes that held equal parts fear and fierce independence. When she noticed him approaching, she straightened her spine and lifted her chin, clearly preparing to defend herself if necessary. "Madam," Thomas said gently, touching the brim of his hat, "you look like you could use some help." She stared at him, her brow furrowing as she tried to make sense of his words. Then she spoke rapidly in that same flowing language, gesturing with one hand while keeping the other firmly on her bag. Thomas recognized the cadence as something European, but he could not place it exactly. "I do not understand," he said slowly, pointing to himself. "Thomas, my name is Thomas." She watched his gesture carefully, then seemed to understand. She pointed to herself. "Olivia," she said clearly. "Olivia Hastings." The surname caught him off guard. Hastings was certainly English, but her accent when she said it was anything but. She must have married an Englishman or American, he reasoned, though he saw no wedding ring on her finger. "Olivia," he repeated, and she nodded, relief flooding her features at this small connection. Other townspeople had begun to notice the scene. Mrs. Henderson, the boarding house owner, came bustling over with her usual nose for gossip and opportunity. "Is this the new arrival?" she asked Thomas, eyeing Olivia with open curiosity. "The one that crazy prospector Hastings sent for before he died." Thomas had heard the story in pieces over the past few weeks. An old prospector named William Hastings had struck a small vein of silver in the hills and suddenly decided he wanted a wife. He had written to some agency back east that specialized in matching men with foreign women seeking new lives in America. Hastings had died of a heart attack 3 weeks ago, never meeting the woman he had sent for. "I think so," Thomas said quietly, "but I do not think she knows yet." Mrs. Henderson clicked her tongue. "Poor thing. Come all this way for nothing. She speak any English at all, not that I can tell." The older woman addressed Olivia directly, speaking slowly and loudly as if volume would somehow bridge the language gap. "You understand me, dear?" Olivia responded with another stream of incomprehensible words, growing more agitated as she realized no one understood her. She pulled a folded letter from her bag and held it out, pointing to the name written on the envelope. "William Hastings, Riverside, California." Thomas took the letter carefully and opened it, scanning the contents. It was written in English, a standard form letter from a marriage broker, promising transportation and housing for Miss Olivia Hastings, formerly of Greece, to meet her sponsor and future husband in Riverside. The date of intended arrival matched today. Greece, Thomas said aloud. She is from Greece. She speaks Greek. Well, that is not going to do her much good here, Mrs. Henderson said practically. And with Hastings dead, she has no sponsor, no money probably, and nowhere to go. We cannot just send her back, can we? Thomas looked at Olivia, who was watching them both with growing anxiety, clearly understanding that something was wrong. Her eyes met his, and he saw such raw vulnerability there that something shifted in his chest. "She can stay at my place," he heard himself say. "Just temporarily until we figure something out. I have that spare room since my brother moved to San Francisco." Mrs. Henderson raised an eyebrow. "That would not be proper, Thomas Anderson, and you know it." "I will sleep in the barn," Thomas said firmly. "She can have the house. I cannot just leave her standing here in the street with nowhere to go." The boarding house owner pursed her lips. "I suppose it is charitable of you, but people will talk. Let them talk." Thomas turned to Olivia and gestured to himself, then pointed down the street toward where his small house sat at the edge of town. He made a roof shape with his hands and pointed again, trying to communicate shelter. Olivia looked uncertain, but she had little choice. She nodded slowly, picking up her bag. Thomas grabbed her trunk, surprised by its weight, and started walking. She followed a few steps behind, her posture wary. The house was modest, just 3 rooms with a front porch and a small barn out back where Thomas kept his 2 horses. He pushed open the door and set her trunk down in the main room, which served as both kitchen and sitting area. The bedroom was off to the left, and a small storage room to the right. Olivia stepped inside cautiously, looking around at the simple furnishings. Thomas pointed to the bedroom. "You," he said, gesturing to her, "sleep there." He pointed to himself and then toward the barn visible through the window. "I sleep there." She seemed to understand, her shoulders relaxing slightly. "Evcharisto," she said softly, placing her hand over her heart. Thomas had no idea what the word meant, but the gesture seemed like gratitude. He nodded and smiled slightly, trying to appear non-threatening. Then he mimed eating, bringing his hand to his mouth. "Are you hungry?" Olivia watched his gesture and nodded. "Ni," she said. "Ni." He had no idea if that meant yes or was just an acknowledgement, but he moved to the small kitchen area and started pulling out what food he had. Bread, some dried beef, cheese, a few vegetables from the garden. It was not much, but it would do for now. As he prepared a simple meal, he was acutely aware of her presence, the way she stood near the door as if ready to flee, the way her eyes tracked his every movement. When he set the plate on the table and gestured for her to sit, she hesitated before slowly approaching. They ate in awkward silence, the only sounds the scrape of utensils and the distant call of a crow outside. Thomas found himself studying her when he thought she was not looking. She had a classical beauty, like the Greek statues he had seen in books, with a straight nose and full lips. There was an intelligence in her eyes that suggested she was taking in everything, trying to make sense of this strange new world. After the meal, exhaustion seemed to hit her all at once. She swayed slightly in her chair, and Thomas quickly stood, guiding her gently toward the bedroom. She was too tired to protest. He opened the door, showed her the simple bed with its clean quilts, and backed away. She offered him another Evcharisto before closing the door softly. Thomas stood in the quiet house for a long moment before gathering a blanket and heading out to the barn. He had meant what he said to Mrs. Henderson. He would sleep out here and give Olivia the privacy and safety she deserved. As he settled into the hay with his blanket, his mind raced with questions. How was he going to communicate with her? What would become of her now that Hastings was dead? And why did he feel such a fierce protectiveness toward a woman he had just met? The next morning, Thomas woke before dawn as usual and did his chores, feeding the horses and checking the fence line. When he approached the house, he found Olivia already awake, standing on the porch with a cup of something steaming in her hands. She had found his coffee supplies and figured out how to use the stove. She looked up as he approached and offered a tentative smile. "Good morning," he said, knowing she would not understand but feeling the need to speak anyway. "Calamera," she replied, and though the word was foreign, the meaning was clear in her tone. Over the next few days, they fell into an awkward routine. Thomas would work during the day, either at the nearby ranch where he was employed or tending to his own property. Olivia would explore the house and the immediate area, always staying close, never wandering into town alone. In the evenings, they would share meals and slowly, painstakingly, they began to try to communicate. It started with simple words. Thomas would point to objects and say their English names: bread, water, table, horse, sun. Olivia would repeat them carefully, her accent thick but her effort clear. Then she would offer the Greek word in return, and Thomas would attempt to mimic her pronunciation, usually making her laugh at his clumsy efforts. "Somi," she would say, holding up the bread. "Somi," Thomas would repeat, mangling the word. Olivia would laugh, a sound like bells, and correct him patiently. "Somi, Somi," he would try again, getting slightly closer. Their breakthrough came about a week after her arrival. Thomas had been trying to ask her about Greece, wanting to understand more about where she came from. He drew pictures in the dirt outside, trying to show an ocean, mountains, buildings. Olivia watched with interest, then grabbed the stick from him and began to draw herself. She sketched islands, labeling them with Greek letters he could not read. She drew what looked like ancient ruins, temples with columns. She drew olive trees and vineyards. Then she drew a small house and two figures, pointing to one and saying something that sounded like Mama and another that sounded like Patera. Family, Thomas realized. She was showing him her family. Then she drew those same two figures lying down, crossing them out with the stick. Her voice was soft and sad as she spoke, and though Thomas could not understand the words, he understood the meaning. Her parents were dead. "I am sorry," he said gently, placing his hand over his heart the way she had done that first day. Olivia looked up at him and their eyes met. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then she reached out and touched his hand where it rested over his heart, her fingers warm and gentle. "Efcharisto," she whispered. "Thank you." Something sparked between them in that moment, a connection that went beyond words. Thomas felt his breath catch, felt the world narrow to just the two of them and the space between their hands. Then Olivia pulled back, seeming flustered, and stood quickly, brushing dirt from her skirt. As the weeks passed, their communication improved. Thomas borrowed every book he could find from the small lending library in town, looking for anything that might help him learn Greek. He found a tattered Greek-English dictionary that a traveling merchant had once traded for supplies, and he studied it every night by lamplight in the barn. He started learning basic phrases: "Kalamura" for good morning, "Kalanishta" for good night, "Pas eyes" for how are you. His pronunciation was terrible, and Olivia would giggle and correct him, but he persisted. He wanted desperately to be able to talk to her, to understand her thoughts and feelings, to know the person behind those intelligent eyes. Olivia, for her part, was learning English much faster than Thomas was learning Greek. She had a natural ear for languages, and she practiced constantly, pointing to things and asking for their names. Within a month, she could construct simple sentences, though her grammar was often confused and her accent remained thick. "Thomas," she said one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, "why you help me? You know me." It was the most complex thing she had said in English yet, and Thomas felt a surge of pride for her. He considered his answer carefully, wanting to find words simple enough for her to understand. "You needed help," he said slowly. "I could not leave you alone, but you give me house. You sleep in barn, this is." She struggled for the word, then said something in Greek that sounded frustrated. "It is the right thing to do," Thomas said, "and I want to." "Why?" She turned to look at him directly, and in the fading light her eyes were warm and searching. Thomas felt his heart thud in his chest. The truth was, he was not entirely sure why himself. All he knew was that from the moment he had seen her step off that stagecoach, he had felt drawn to her. Over the past month, that feeling had only grown stronger. He looked forward to coming home each evening, to seeing her face light up when she successfully communicated something new, to hearing her laugh at his terrible Greek pronunciation. But he could not say all that. Not yet. Not when he was not sure she felt anything similar. "Because you are a good person," he said finally. "I can see that, and because—" He paused, searching for simple words, "because I like having you here." Olivia smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes. "I like here too," she said softly. "You are a kind man, Thomas." The moment hung between them, charged with possibility. Then a coyote howled in the distance, breaking the spell, and Olivia shivered slightly. Thomas stood, bringing an extra blanket from inside to drape over her shoulders. His hands lingered perhaps a moment longer than necessary, and he thought he felt her lean very slightly into his touch. As October turned to November, the weather grew cooler, and Thomas finally moved back into the house, taking the small storage room as his bedroom. It was cramped and barely fit his sleeping role, but it meant he could keep the fire going through the cold nights for Olivia's comfort. She protested at first, trying to insist he take the proper bedroom back, but he refused firmly. Their evenings took on a new quality with them both in the house. After supper, they would sit by the fire and Thomas would practice his Greek while Olivia practiced her English. He learned the words for emotions, agape for love, which he repeated to himself often when she was not listening, chara for joy, lippy for sadness. He learned to count, to describe the weather, to express basic needs and wants. But what he really wanted to learn, what drove him to study late into every night, was how to express what he felt growing in his heart. He was falling in love with Olivia Hastings, he realized. Completely, thoroughly, irrevocably in love. He loved the way she hummed Greek songs while cooking. He loved how she had planted a small herb garden outside the kitchen window, bringing familiar scents from her homeland to this new place. He loved her determination, her kindness, the way she treated his horses with gentle affection. He loved everything about her, but confessing such feelings across a language barrier seemed impossible. What if he said the wrong words? What if she did not feel the same? What if she still saw him only as the kind stranger who had helped her? Nothing more. One cold November evening, Thomas came home from work to find Olivia in tears. She was sitting at the table, holding a letter, her shoulders shaking with sobs. Thomas immediately rushed to her side, kneeling beside her chair. "Olivia, what happened? What is wrong?" His Greek had improved enough to ask. "Tai Simveni." She looked at him with red-rimmed eyes and tried to explain in a mixture of Greek and broken English. From what Thomas could piece together, the letter was from the marriage agency. They had heard of William Hastings' death and were demanding she either find a new sponsor or return to Greece immediately, reimbursing them for the cost of her passage. The amount was staggering, more than Olivia could ever hope to earn on her own. "I must go back," she said miserably in English. "I have no money, I cannot stay." "No, Thomas said firmly, taking her hands in his. "You do not have to go anywhere, but I have no choice. The agency says I must pay or find sponsor. I cannot impose on you more. You already do so much." Thomas felt panic rising in his chest. The thought of Olivia leaving, of never seeing her again, was unbearable. He made a decision in that moment, one he probably should have thought through more carefully, but that felt absolutely right. "Marry me," he said in English, then repeated it in his halting Greek. "Pantrifty me." Olivia stared at him in shock. "What?" "Marry me," Thomas repeated, more confidently now. "If you are my wife, you can stay, you will be a citizen, the agency cannot make you leave." "Thomas, you do not have to do this. This is too much to ask." "You are not asking, I am offering." He squeezed her hands gently. "Olivia, these past 2 months have been the happiest of my life. I know we cannot speak perfectly yet, but I feel like I understand you. I feel like you understand me, and I." He took a deep breath, reaching for the Greek word he had memorized, the one he had practiced saying 100 times alone in the barn. "Si agapo, I love you." Olivia's eyes widened, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. "You learned this. You learned to say this in Greek." "I have been learning," Thomas admitted. "I wanted to be able to tell you properly. I know my Greek is terrible, but I mean it. Si agapo, Olivia, I love you. I think I have loved you since I first saw you step off that stagecoach." "Thomas," she whispered, and then she spoke rapidly in Greek, words tumbling over each other. He caught some of them. Love, kind, good man, afraid, happy. She was crying and smiling at the same time. "I do not understand all of that," Thomas said helplessly. "My Greek is not good enough yet." Olivia laughed through her tears and switched to English, speaking slowly and carefully. "I say that I love you too. I love you so much. I was afraid to say because I think maybe you only help me from kind, not from love. But I love you, Thomas. I love you." Thomas felt his heart soar. He reached up to cup her face gently, wiping away her tears with his thumbs. "Is that a yes? Will you marry me?" "Nee," Olivia said, then corrected herself with a laugh. "Yes. Yes, I will marry you." Thomas could not help himself. He leaned in and kissed her, soft and gentle at first, then deeper as she responded, her arms coming up to wrap around his neck. It was a kiss that held months of longing, of connection built through patience and effort, of love that had grown despite every barrier. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Thomas rested his forehead against hers. "I promise I will keep learning Greek," he said. "I will learn every word if it means I can tell you everything in my heart. And I will learn more English," Olivia promised. "We will learn together. We will talk together. We will live together." "Forever," Thomas added. "Forever," she agreed. They were married a week later in a simple ceremony at the small church in Riverside. The preacher, Reverend Matthews, was understanding about the language barrier and kept things simple. Thomas had bought Olivia a simple gold band, spending most of his savings on it, and she cried when he slipped it on her finger. Several townspeople attended, including Mrs. Henderson, who had softened considerably toward their situation, and a few of Thomas's co-workers from the ranch. Olivia wore a modest blue dress that she had sewn herself, having found the fabric in Murphy's general store. She looked beautiful, her dark hair crowned with a simple wreath of late-season wildflowers that Mrs. Henderson had helped her make. When Reverend Matthews said, "You may kiss your bride," Thomas did so with great tenderness, ignoring the whoops and hollers from his friends. This was Olivia's moment, their moment, and he wanted her to feel cherished and celebrated. The celebration afterward was small but warm. Mrs. Henderson had organized a gathering at the boarding house with food and music. Someone had a fiddle, and there was dancing. Thomas was self-conscious about his dancing skills, but Olivia did not seem to mind. She laughed as he stepped on her feet and apologized profusely in a mixture of English and Greek. "Is good," she assured him, her eyes sparkling. "I teach you Greek dances, you teach me American dances. We learn together, ni." "Yes," Thomas agreed, pulling her closer. "Always together." As evening fell, they walked back to their house, which truly felt like their house now. Thomas had given up the storage room and moved his things into the bedroom, into Olivia's bedroom, into their bedroom. He was nervous, he realized. Despite being 26 years old, he had little experience with women beyond a few chaste kisses, and he wanted everything to be perfect for Olivia. She seemed to sense his nervousness. Once inside, she took his hand and led him to sit on the edge of the bed. "Thomas," she said softly in her improving English, "I am nervous too, but I love you, I trust you." Her honesty broke through his anxiety. He cupped her face in his hands and kissed her slowly, taking his time. "I love you so much," he murmured against her lips. "Si agapo." "Si agapo," she whispered back. And then there were no more words needed as they came together as husband and wife. The months that followed were blissful. Winter settled over Riverside, bringing cold nights that gave them an excuse to stay wrapped up together under thick quilts, talking late into the night. Their conversations were still sometimes stilted, requiring patience and creativity, but they were improving constantly. Thomas continued to study Greek diligently. He had sent away for more books, proper language learning texts, and he practiced every day. Olivia helped him, correcting his pronunciation and teaching him new words. She taught him Greek songs, and sometimes in the evenings, she would sing while Thomas played his harmonica, blending their musical traditions. Olivia's English was now good enough that she could have basic conversations with the townspeople. She had made friends with some of the other women, particularly Mrs. Henderson and young Sarah Murphy, the general store owner's daughter. They taught her about American cooking and customs, while she taught them a few Greek dishes and phrases. One particularly meaningful development was when Thomas managed to write a letter to Olivia's aunt back in Greece, the only family she had left. He had Olivia dictate it in Greek, and he painstakingly copied down the letters, even though he could not read what he was writing. The letter explained that Olivia was safe, married to a good man, and happy in California. When a response came 3 months later, Olivia cried as she read her aunt's blessing and relief. "She says she was worried," Olivia translated for Thomas, her voice thick with emotion. "She says she is happy I found love. She says she can tell from my words that you are a good man, and she gives us her blessing." She looked up at Thomas with shining eyes. "She says maybe one day she will see America." "I would like that," Thomas said sincerely. "Your family is my family now." Spring came early in 1879, bringing warm sunshine and new growth. Thomas had gotten a promotion at the ranch, now serving as the head horse trainer with better pay. It meant he could finally start saving money properly, thinking about their future. He dreamed of buying land, starting their own small ranch. It was in late April when Olivia told him her news. They were sitting on the porch in the evening, watching the stars come out, when she took his hand and placed it on her still flat stomach. "Thomas," she said softly in English, then switched to Greek for the important words before translating back. "I am with child. We are going to have a baby." Thomas felt like all the air had left his lungs. A baby. They were going to have a baby. He turned to Olivia, searching her face. "Are you happy about this?" he asked in Greek, wanting to make sure she understood. "So happy," she assured him, tears in her eyes. "Are you happy?" "I am beyond happy," Thomas said, pulling her into his arms. "A baby, our baby." He kissed the top of her head, his heart so full he thought it might burst. "I love you so much." "I love you too," Olivia murmured against his chest. See Agapo, the pregnancy was not easy. Olivia suffered from terrible morning sickness in the early months, and Thomas felt helpless watching her be ill. He did everything he could think of to help, bringing her weak tea and crackers, holding her hair back, rubbing her feet when they swelled. Mrs. Henderson and Sarah Murphy helped too, giving advice and support. But through it all, Olivia remained strong and optimistic. As her belly grew, she would talk to the baby in Greek, telling stories of her homeland, singing lullabies. Thomas would place his hand on her stomach and feel the baby kick, marveling at the miracle of new life. "Boy or girl?" he asked one night as they lay in bed, his hand on her belly. "I do not know," Olivia said. "You want boy." "I just want a healthy baby," Thomas said honestly. "And you to be safe and healthy, that is all I care about." "You will be good father," Olivia said, lacing her fingers through his. "The best father. And you will be the best mother. You are already teaching our baby Greek before they are even born." Olivia laughed. "I want baby to know both languages, both cultures, Greek and American." "That is perfect," Thomas agreed. "They will be lucky to have both." As Olivia's due date approached in December, Thomas became increasingly nervous. Childbirth was dangerous, and he had heard too many stories of women who did not survive. He tried not to let Olivia see his fear, but she knew him too well. "I will be fine," she assured him one evening, speaking slowly in English so he would understand every word. "I am strong. Our baby is strong. We will be fine." "I cannot lose you," Thomas said, his voice breaking. "You are everything to me." "You will not lose me," Olivia said firmly, taking his face in her hands. "I promise. I am not leaving you, Thomas Anderson. We have whole life together still, you and me and our baby." The contractions started on a cold December morning. Mrs. Henderson and Sarah Murphy came immediately, taking charge and banishing Thomas from the bedroom. He paced the main room like a caged animal, jumping every time he heard a sound from behind the closed door. The labor was long and difficult. Thomas could hear Olivia crying out in pain, and it took everything in him not to burst through the door. He prayed to every god he could think of, American and Greek, begging for Olivia and the baby to be safe. Finally, after what felt like an eternity but was actually about 12 hours, he heard a new sound. A baby crying. Thomas froze, his heart pounding. Then the door opened and Mrs. Henderson appeared with a tired smile. "Congratulations, Thomas," she said. "You have a son." Thomas's legs nearly gave out. "A son? And Olivia?" "She is tired but fine. Come meet your family." Thomas practically ran into the bedroom. Olivia was propped up on pillows, looking exhausted but radiant with a tiny bundle wrapped in blankets in her arms. When she saw Thomas, her face lit up with the most beautiful smile he had ever seen. "Come meet your son," she said in Greek, and Thomas understood perfectly. He approached slowly, almost reverently, and looked down at the baby in her arms. His son. The baby had a shock of dark hair and a tiny, scrunched-up face. As Thomas watched, the baby opened his eyes, revealing dark blue that would probably turn brown like Olivia's. "He is perfect," Thomas whispered, reaching out to gently touch the baby's tiny hand. Immediately, the infant's fingers curled around his finger, gripping with surprising strength. Thomas felt tears streaming down his face. "You are perfect. Thank you, Olivia. Thank you for this gift." "Our gift," Olivia corrected softly. "Our son. What should we name him?" They had discussed names before, but now, looking at his actual child, Thomas found he could not speak. Olivia smiled knowingly. "I think we should call him Theodore," she said. "Theodore means gift from God in Greek, and he is our gift." "Theodore," Thomas repeated, testing the name. "Theodore Anderson. It is perfect." "Theodore Andreas Anderson," Olivia amended. "Andreas for middle name. It was my father's name." Thomas leaned down and kissed her forehead gently. "Theodore Andreas Anderson, welcome to the world, son." The first months with a newborn were exhausting but wonderful. Theodore was a healthy baby with strong lungs, which he demonstrated frequently in the middle of the night. Thomas and Olivia took turns walking him, rocking him, singing to him in both Greek and English. Olivia proved to be a natural mother, patient and loving even when exhausted. Thomas was more awkward, terrified of doing something wrong, but he learned. He learned how to change diapers, how to hold the baby properly, how to soothe him when he cried. He would talk to Theodore constantly, telling him about his day, about the horses, about how much he loved him and his mother. As winter turned to spring and Theodore grew, their lives settled into a new normal. Thomas continued working at the ranch, now with even more motivation to succeed. He was saving aggressively, determined to buy that land he had dreamed of. Olivia's English was now fluent, though she still had an accent that Thomas found charming. His Greek had improved tremendously as well, to the point where they could have full conversations in either language. They still mixed them, often switching mid-sentence, creating their own hybrid way of communicating that was uniquely theirs. Theodore was growing fast, a happy baby who smiled easily and loved attention. When he started babbling, he made sounds from both languages, and Thomas and Olivia would laugh, debating whether he was trying to say mama or mana, dada or impampas. One evening when Theodore was about 8 months old, sitting on a blanket and playing with wooden blocks Thomas had made for him, Olivia turned to Thomas with a serious expression. "I want to tell you something," she said in English. "When I first came here, when I stepped off that stagecoach, I was so scared. I did not know where I was, could not understand anyone, and the man who was supposed to help me was dead. I thought my life was over before it started." Thomas reached for her hand, listening intently. "But then I saw you," Olivia continued, "and you looked at me not with pity but with kindness, with respect. You helped me, but more than that, you saw me. Not just a foreign woman who needed help, but a person. And you learned my language, Thomas. Do you know how much that means? You could have just made me learn English and forget Greek, but you learned with me. You learned so you could tell me you loved me in my own language." "Of course I did," Thomas said. "I wanted to be able to talk to you, really talk to you. I wanted to understand you." "And that is why I love you so much," Olivia said, tears shining in her eyes. "You gave me more than a home and a name. You gave me a partner. You gave me love. You gave me family. You gave me everything." Thomas pulled her close, kissing her deeply. "You gave me just as much," he murmured. "You gave me purpose. You gave me joy. You gave me Theodore. You made my life full when I did not even know it was empty." They sat together in comfortable silence for a while, watching Theodore play. Then Olivia spoke again. "I have been thinking, I want to teach Greek to others. Maybe the children in town. There are some immigrant families and they might want their children to keep their languages. And maybe some American children would like to learn too." "That is a wonderful idea," Thomas said enthusiastically. "You would be an excellent teacher." "You think the town would allow it?" "I think people respect you, Olivia. They have seen how hard you have worked to learn English, how you have become part of the community. If you want to teach, I will support you completely." And so Olivia began teaching Greek lessons in their home, 2 afternoons a week. A handful of children came at first, mostly from immigrant families grateful for someone who understood their desire to maintain their heritage. But word spread about Mrs. Anderson's language classes, and soon a few curious American children came too, wanting to learn something exotic and new. Olivia loved teaching. She was patient and creative, using songs and games to help the children learn. Thomas would sometimes watch from the doorway, his heart swelling with pride. This brave woman who had arrived speaking no English was now teaching others her language, bridging cultures, creating understanding. Time moved steadily forward. Theodore took his first steps at 11 months, charging forward with the same determination his mother had. His first word was "Mama," which made Olivia cry happy tears, though Thomas pretended to be jealous until Theodore also said "Dada" a week later. By the time Theodore was 2, Thomas had finally saved enough to make an offer on a piece of land about 5 miles outside Riverside. It was 50 acres with a creek running through it, good grazing land for horses. The owner, an aging rancher ready to retire, accepted Thomas's offer, and suddenly they were landowners. They built their dream slowly. Thomas could not afford to leave his job at the ranch immediately, so he worked on their property in the evenings and on weekends. He built a small house first, bigger than the one in town with room for their growing family. Then he started on a barn, corrals, fencing. Olivia worked alongside him when she could, little Theodore playing nearby under the watchful eye of whichever parent was not actively building. They made it a family project, teaching Theodore as they worked. "This is our land," Thomas would tell Theodore in English. "This is our home," Olivia would add in Greek. Theodore, growing up bilingual, would nod seriously as if he understood completely. When Theodore was 3, Olivia became pregnant again. This time the pregnancy was easier, though she was more tired chasing after an energetic toddler. Thomas insisted she rest more, taking on more of the child care when he was home. Their second child, a daughter, was born in the spring of 1882 on their new property, in the house Thomas had built with his own hands. They named her Katerina, after Olivia's mother, with the middle name Rose for Thomas's mother. Katerina had Olivia's dark hair but Thomas's lighter eyes, a beautiful blend of both her parents. Theodore was fascinated by his baby sister, wanting to help with everything, though his help was sometimes more hindrance than assistance. Life on their ranch was challenging but fulfilling. Thomas had left his job at the larger ranch and now focused entirely on training horses on their own property. Word had spread about his skill, and people came from surrounding areas to have him train their horses. Olivia continued teaching Greek lessons, now holding them in their larger home. The years passed in a blur of hard work, love, and laughter. Theodore grew into a bright, energetic boy who could speak both English and Greek fluently, switching between them as easily as breathing. Katerina was quieter but equally intelligent, with a special love for animals that rivaled her father's. In 1885, Olivia's aunt from Greece finally made the journey to visit. Maria was an elderly woman, but spry and curious, excited to see the new world her niece had embraced. She stayed for 3 months, and it was a joy for Olivia to speak Greek constantly again, to share stories and memories with family. Maria adored Thomas, telling Olivia repeatedly in Greek how lucky she was to have found such a good man. Thomas, whose Greek was now excellent, understood every word and would blush, insisting he was the lucky one. Before Maria left, she pulled Thomas aside. "I want to thank you," she said in slow Greek so he would understand. "When Olivia left Greece, I thought I would never see her happy again. She had lost so much, and I worried about sending her to marry a stranger. But you have given her a beautiful life. You learned her language to tell her you love her. That is not something a selfish man does. That is something a man with a good heart does." "I love her more than anything," Thomas said simply in Greek. "She is my heart." "I know," Maria said, patting his cheek. "I see it every time you look at her. Take care of her always." "Always," Thomas promised. In 1887, their third child was born, another son they named Marcus. Then in 1889, a second daughter, Sophia. Their house grew louder and more chaotic, filled with children speaking in two languages, Greek songs mixing with American folk tunes, the smell of both Mediterranean and American cooking coming from Olivia's kitchen. Thomas and Olivia grew older together, their love deepening with each passing year. They still had their evening talks, now often interrupted by children needing attention, but they made time for each other. They still mixed Greek and English in their conversations, their own private language that their children understood but outsiders found confusing. The ranch prospered. Thomas's reputation as a horse trainer was known throughout Southern California. They were not wealthy, but they were comfortable, with enough to provide for their children and save for the future. Theodore, as the eldest, showed an interest in following in his father's footsteps with horses. Katerina was drawn to teaching, often helping her mother with the Greek lessons. Marcus and Sophia were still young, their interest still forming. On their 10th wedding anniversary in 1888, Thomas took Olivia out to a hill on their property where they could see the entire ranch spread below them. The children were with Mrs. Henderson, who had remained a good friend over the years, giving them a rare evening alone. "You remember," Thomas said in Greek, "when I first tried to tell you I loved you, how terrible my pronunciation was." Olivia laughed. "You sounded like you were choking. I almost got you water." "But you understood what I meant." "Of course I did. Your heart spoke even when your words could not." She leaned against his shoulder, looking out at the land they had built together. "Do you ever regret it, marrying a woman who did not speak your language? Who brought so many complications into your life?" "Never," Thomas said firmly, switching to English. "Not for one single second. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Olivia. You and our children, this life we built together. It is everything I never knew I wanted." "I love you," Olivia said, tilting her face up to his. "Si agapo in both languages always." "Si agapo," Thomas replied, kissing her as the sun set over their ranch. "I love you, always and forever." The years continued to pass. The children grew, learned, thrived. Theodore eventually took over most of the horse training from his father, allowing Thomas to slow down as he aged. Katerina became a teacher herself, opening a small school in Riverside that taught both English and Greek. Marcus decided to study law, the first in the family to pursue higher education. Sophia, the youngest, surprised everyone by developing a talent for writing, penning stories about the West that blended her Greek heritage with her American upbringing. Thomas and Olivia became grandparents in 1898 when Theodore married a local girl named Elizabeth and had a daughter. More grandchildren followed over the years, filling their ranch with new life and new generations. One evening in the summer of 1908, 30 years after Olivia had stepped off that stagecoach in Riverside, Thomas and Olivia sat together on the porch of the house he had built. They were in their 60s now, their hair gray, their faces lined with the evidence of a life well lived. Their grandchildren played in the yard, a mix of ages speaking in a mixture of English and Greek. "You remember our first meal together?" Olivia asked, speaking in Greek. They still alternated between languages, though both were now fluent in both. "You gave me bread and cheese, and we sat in silence because we could not talk to each other. I remember thinking you were the most beautiful woman I had ever seen," Thomas replied in English, "and being terrified that you would disappear before I could find a way to tell you." "And now here we are," Olivia said softly, taking his hand. 30 years, 4 children, 8 grandchildren so far, a whole life built together. "The best life," Thomas said. "Do you ever miss Greece?" "Sometimes," Olivia admitted. "I miss my aunt. I miss the olive groves and the sea. But this is my home now. You are my home. Our family is my home. I would not trade this life for anything. I learned your language so I could tell you I loved you, Thomas said, squeezing her hand. But what I discovered was so much more than that. I learned your culture, your history, your way of seeing the world. You opened up everything for me, Olivia. You made my world bigger and richer and fuller. And you gave me a place to belong when I thought I had lost everything, Olivia replied, her eyes bright with tears. You saw me as a person, not just a foreign woman to be pitied. You valued what I brought with me from Greece instead of asking me to forget it. You learned with me, grew with me, built with me. Thomas leaned over and kissed her forehead. Si agapo, Olivia, today and every day. I love you, Thomas. My cowboy who learned Greek to say I love you. They sat together in comfortable silence, watching their grandchildren play, listening to the sounds of their ranch, the home they had created together. The sun set slowly, painting the California sky in shades of gold and orange, and Thomas thought about that day 30 years ago when a scared young woman had stepped off a stagecoach and changed his life forever. He had learned her language to say I love you, but what they had built together transcended any single language. They had created a family, a legacy, a bridge between two cultures. They had proven that love could overcome any barrier, that understanding was worth the effort, that the most meaningful connections required work and patience and dedication. As darkness fell, and they went inside together to prepare supper for their family, Thomas felt nothing but gratitude. Gratitude for that day in 1878 when he had decided to help a stranger. Gratitude for every stumbling Greek word he had learned. Gratitude for Olivia's patience and courage. Gratitude for the life they had built together, word by word, day by day, year by year. That night, as they lay in bed in the house he had built with his own hands, Olivia nestled against his chest the way she had for 30 years. Thomas, she murmured sleepily. Yes, my love. Thank you for learning my language. Thank you for seeing me. Thank you for loving me. Thomas kissed the top of her head. Thank you for teaching me. Thank you for staying. Thank you for loving me back. They fell asleep together, as they had for 30 years, and would for many more to come. Two people from different worlds who had found a way to speak the only language that truly mattered. The language of love, commitment, and shared dreams. Their story was proof that the greatest journeys begin with a single step, or in their case, with a woman stepping off a stagecoach and a cowboy deciding to help. Everything else, all the beautiful complexity of their life together, had grown from that one moment of kindness, nurtured by patience and sustained by love that transcended any barrier language could create. As the years rolled on into the new century, their love story became legend in Riverside. People would speak of Thomas Anderson, the cowboy who learned Greek to tell his foreign bride he loved her. They spoke of Olivia Anderson, the brave Greek woman who built a new life in a strange land without forgetting where she came from. But mostly, they spoke of a love that proved dedication and understanding could overcome anything. A love that built not just a family but a bridge between worlds, and a legacy that would endure for generations to come in the heart of California, where the Wild West met ancient Greece, and two hearts found a way to speak as one.